Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Megan Easley-Walsh, and this is History Stories. With a PhD in history, as an author, a writing consultant, and editor, my life is full of history and stories. With that in mind, this podcast's goal is to explore some of those stories of history. This will include diving into antiques and interesting historical artifacts that I've found, looking behind the scenes at inspiration for my novels, taking a peek at places I visited, and uncovering new topics of interest. Thank you for joining me. Let's begin. Today is May 8th. 79 years ago, after years of war, there was officially peace in Europe. It was VE Day. After years of darkness and blackouts, the lights could once again be turned on. In the first episode, we discussed World War II in connection with my first novel, Flight Before Dawn. But that isn't the only book I've written that travels to this time period. My novel, Painted Faces, speaks to the building tensions prior to the war. Framed, a novel that we'll be discussing in a future episode, is firmly placed in World War II. Today, we're talking about my novel, Vow of Gold, which is partially set during this time. Here's a little about Vow of Gold. Graham Doyle, an American, is doing what everyone else is doing, trying to survive the bombs and battles raging in Britain during the Second World War. But he's also on the trail of a book from centuries ago that has the power to unlock a burning desire. In 1222, an earthquake shatters a merchant's confidence. With his life spared, he promises to make the most beautiful book the world has ever known. Keeping that promise proves even more difficult than surviving the earthquake. The rumor of the book reverberates through the centuries, but was it ever even written? If Graham can't answer that question, he risks losing his sanity. For Graham, he too needed a guiding light to get him through the terror of war before the lights could come back on again. I am reminded of Vera Lynn's song from 1942, where she sings, quote, "When the lights come on again all over the world," end quote. In the song, she yearns for ordinary things like ships sailing and wedding rings and kissing meaning hello and not goodbye. Her song captured the hopes of those years, when all were yearning for light. The light that Graham in my novel Vow of Gold clung to shimmered in his mind in the form of a story he'd heard as a young boy about the Book of Gold. It was rumored to be the most beautiful book that the world had ever known. But did it even exist? In Vow of Gold, two parallel stories are told, that of Graham's search for the Book of Gold and that of the medieval idea and creation of the book. There is also an inclusion of the 1889 World's Fair in Paris, the location where Graham first heard about the Book of Gold and remembered it among the many wonders that he encountered in Paris. It traces his interactions with the Impressionist movement and the red R's of rejection that were stamped across his childhood memories. Red lettering is often also a feature of medieval script and manuscripts. My exposure to medieval manuscripts helped to inspire the idea behind the creation of the book in Vow of Gold. Living in Ireland, I've been fortunate to view examples, such as the Book of Kells. Here's a little about the Book of Kells. For over 1,200 years, it has been one of the most prominent jewels of Irish art. Some consider the Book of Kells to be the most elaborate of the decorated Gospels from between the 7th and 9th centuries, during the high point of Irish art at home and abroad via monasteries. The Book of Kells comprises 4 books, one for each of the Gospels. Christianity brought both Latin and literacy to Ireland, and the high cost of producing vellum manuscripts meant that scriptoria could only be found in the wealthiest monasteries. What began in a monastery today draws international crowds to view it in Trinity College in Dublin. The Book of Kells was likely created in Iona by Irish monks, or in Kells, or in some combination, around the year 800. It is unknown because the monks that began in Iona in Scotland had to leave after Viking raids. One stylistic expression that is particularly strong is the use of color. The illustrations are at times amplifiers of the text. At other times, they seem to project an exuberance and jubilance as testament to monastic devotion. Metalwork and stone carving throughout Ireland bear stylistic similarities with the design work within the Book of Kells, and cultures as diverse as the Pictish, Assyrian, Coptic, Armenian, Byzantine, and Mediterranean have also influenced the design within the Book of Kells. One important inclusion in the Matthew volume of the Book of Kells is Western art's first Virgin and Child depiction, which is possibly based on Greek, Coptic, or Syriac iconography, and it shares a compositional similarity with an 8th century high cross on the island of Iona. When considering the wider artistic context for the Book of Kells, at least a short mention should be made of its enduring legacy. The 19th century Celtic revival often drew inspiration from motifs, and even Joyce in Finnegan's Wake mentioned the Book of Kells. Often described as, quote, the work of angels, end quote, after Gerald of Wales' exuberance over either the Book of Kells or a similar manuscript, the artistry remains not only eye-catching but engaging centuries after its creation. In Vow of Gold, the book that Graham is desperate to find isn't the Book of Kells. It's a fictitious book imagined for the purpose of the story, but its inspiration is drawn from the very real Book of Kells. Manuscripts and works of art can shine as beacons of enduring humanity in the blackness of war. We've spoken before about how part of history's responsibility is to remember. I share with you this quotation from General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Quote, "The world must know what happened and never forget." End quote. Today, on VE Day, we remember. We remember that they gave their yesterdays for our todays. We remember that they wanted us to have a world in peace, and that the greatest tribute that we can pay for the fallen and the veterans is to protect the peace they struggled on our behalf for. Thank you for joining me for this episode of History Stories. To find out more about my writing and my research, visit me at meganeasley-walsh.com. And you can find my novel, Vow of Gold, on Amazon. I look forward to sharing more history stories with you in the next episode.